that we need to do. And our chair is gonna be about 5 minutes late, so I apologize. This is kind of a mess, but hopefully it gets better.
And voting.
Hear that?
This thing's supposed to light up.
It is. Okay, you guys?
Is it working?
Yeah.
Oh.
Good
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the planning board, regular meeting of Wednesday, August 2nd, 7 p.m. We'll begin tonight's meeting with a public hearing. Before we do move into the public hearing, however, I do have a statement that I'd like to read. And planning board meetings are open to the public and we do encourage attendance. However, public comment is only allowed under the public comment section when recognized by the board chair. Speakers must state their name and address for the record and be limited to 3 minutes. All speakers will follow the rules of common etiquette, including refraining from vulgar and abusive language, yelling, arguing, and disrespectful behavior. Comments or complaints against employees, elected or appointed officials of the town will not be allowed. And the public comment portion of the meeting is limited to non-agenda items only. These same regulations do apply for public comments during new or old business, except for the 3-minute time limit. So with that being said, we'll open public hearing for regarding chapter 140 land use amendments. These are being done in conformance with LD 2003. And we will open the public hearing. Is there anybody that wishes or has taken an opportunity to review the amendments and would like to make any comments to the board regarding this? So, yeah, sure. Come on up, and whoever this gentleman was getting up first, Pat. You were. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Robert Levins. I live at 262 West Shore Road. I have digested as much as I can about this initiative by the state and by the draft insertion of various amendments to our zoning bylaw. And I think many of the insertions are not required by the LD 2000 and are put in zoning districts, defeating the intent of the original zoning almost entirely, including our zoning district, which is R3, which is comprised of about a third of the town. So it defeats, the initiative defeats many of the provisions of the zoning designation of R3. It is going to be controlled by a special permit in those districts. And the sole person that's going to approve the special permit is the code enforcement officer. By the way, the thing is designed. I think the whole thing is a farce. And there's nothing about it that seems to anybody to have known about in the time to react, in time to speak tonight. And I'm appalled. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Robinson, Brattle Street. I'm looking at the, let me see, it's, a residential, hard to get my phone, areas generally have 4 dwellings.
Can you speak into the mic?
Sorry, I'm looking at, is it better? I'm looking at, 4 residential area, generally 4 dwelling
Can you
units.
give me like a 140, 47?
I don't know, I
some type
can't
of a
find it.
number?
It's where there's a lot of red. Affordable housing provision.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so one thing, this is just a persnickety, you say on parcels that are vacant, 4 additional dwellings will be allowed. You don't need the additional there. Because there are no parcels on a vacant lot. But on just before that, on parcels with existing dwellings, 2 additional dwellings will be allowed as follows. 1 within the dwelling, 1 attached to existing dwelling or detached. So does it mean that's only 2 additional dwellings if there's already 1 there? And does it mean that it has to be within the dwelling and then the other one attached or the one detached? It's not clear. And I don't like this whole bill anyway, no matter what. I don't think we should be putting out all kinds of, crowd these lots and deal with traffic and everything, but this is done by the state and, it's a done deal. So I think that needs to be a little clearer, like how many, if you're saying you can have 4 dwellings on a vacant lot, are you, with existing dwellings, are you allowing 3 or 4 or 2 or two more? It's just not clear. So, and that's really all I saw, and, and like I said, I don't like any of it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the application.
Oh. Hello, welcome.
So my name is Betsy Ware. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I recently found out about this bylaw change, and I am asking the planning board to hold off on voting on it until some questions can be answered. So I'm a land use planner by training. I have 40 years of land use planning and preservation planning experience. I moved to South Berwick 5 years ago to Witch Trot Road. And I was expecting a presentation tonight of what was being proposed. I did read the language and I did call the planning agency today to ask questions and they couldn't answer them. So I was a little concerned about that. As I understand what is being proposed is there are two major proposals. One is for affordable housing in the downtown district, which there's a map that has been provided with LD 2003, the main mandate for housing. And that's basically in the downtown district. And that area is fairly densely developed and has town water and sewer. Is that correct?
Yes, it does, go ahead, keep going.
So that's item one. So, and that's what, as I understand it, is being mandated by the state of Maine is to address putting more units in where there's water and sewer in the downtown district. As I understand it, it's high density, affordable housing. It's 80% of area mean income, which would be about 60,000 per household. From my experience, it's better, even though you've got water and sewer downtown. And I do think there should be a fair amount of affordable units downtown on water and sewer. I think they should be scattered throughout the town. That avoids kind of a stigma of the neighborhood having affordable housing or that type of housing. I think it's everybody's responsibility to address affordable housing. So I think it's better to have it in multiple locations. I do have a question of how many units are anticipated to be put downtown. Has anybody run any density requirements or any?
That's gonna be a fact and case specific circumstance that's dependent on each and every lot. I think that this particular law does really two things. First of all, back up and say, we actually started these conversations about a year ago. And this has been discussed at both the planning board and the town council, probably 3 or 4 times with full presentation of each one of those times. From Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission, that was properly noticed on the agenda. It's been on Facebook, it's been online for quite some time. So originally, we were supposed to have these changes in by June 30th. But through some advocacy up in Augusta, the implementation was put on for us this town until basically December 31st. So this law really does a couple different things. It requires that we allow accessory dwelling units on every lot in town. And so, right, yeah, every lot in town, it's a right. So someone had made a statement that it's up to the code enforcement officer to issue that permit. That is absolutely correct because it changes it from what would be a planning board review to a right within the state of Maine, and that's not something that we would then be able to say, no, you can't do it. So that's why it's being pushed in terms of the ADU, the accessory dwelling unit. That's why it's being pushed to the code enforcement office. South Berwick is actually, frankly, in a very good position, whether or not you agree with affordable housing and what it should be and what it shouldn't be, and where it is in the town and where it's not in the town. That's not the debate that I'm going to be entering into tonight. What this is in regards tonight is to bring us into conformance with the state mandated requirements. Everybody now has a right to an accessory dwelling unit. There are other items on here, I've read it multiple times, I have no further questions myself on this. The exception being parking, and yes, you will be allowed to go up to 4 units on certain parcels of land. There are provisions in there where it says that you do have to go to the planning board to make sure that you are meeting some minimum requirements. But as far as and then going back to the affordable housing is meant to apply to the whole town, okay? And there are stipulations within the state law that state that you have to allow multifamily housing where residential homes are allowed, and you have to allow accessory dwelling units. So now become by right. So the density requirements are really moot. It doesn't matter. No studies have been done in our regard. If it can fit, it can go in. That's just the bottom line. There's no calculation of how much infill can happen. We didn't look at that because there's no need to, because the law says if you want to do it, you can do it. If you want to have a multifamily home wherever a single family residence is allowed, you can do that. But the one caveat in the state law is it has to be within a designated growth area that is served by public water and sewer. So that's why when you look here on table A, you'll see that affordable housing development as defined in here according to the state of Maine. That's why you'll see it go all the way across, with the exception of the R4, R5, shoreland protection and the resource protection in the industrial zone. Because one, in the industrial area, I don't recall, I have to go look, but I don't think you can put in residential homes. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Maybe I
You're right,
too.
you're right. I
Yeah,
agree.
and then on the R4 and R5, those do not have public water and sewer. So by its own definition, it can't go there. And I know there are probably some on the board that want to say that's fine, go in. So in my view, in looking at this and the requirements that are put before us, we didn't really have to do here in this town a whole heck of a lot of changes to our ordinances because we already had ADU allowances here within this town.
Right.
What we didn't have was the affordable criteria. And in full disclosure, the conversation that we've had on this board, this law doesn't do anything for affordable housing. It really isn't. It's basically, it's giving density bonuses to people who want to build because you can build more on your land. And it gives everybody by right access to building accessory dwelling units. So all those that want to go out and do Airbnb, go right ahead, because that's what it's going to do. So the town is going to really have to look at other requirements out there on short-term methods as we progress down this, because that's all it's doing. It's not going to be meeting any of the mandates of the state.
So I live in R3 and there's no water and sewer.
It's a designated growth zone that is served by water and sewer portions thereof. It doesn't have to be up and down every road, but we can't, what you're suggesting is then to take the zone and break it up further and further and further and further. And that's not required. That's not what we're required to do. We simply have to identify these areas, designated growth. These items are now allowed, and by right, you have no choice. And so put them in your zoning. We got it. Here we are. We were served with a paper. This is where it's got to go because this is what the state law says. So R3 designated growth zone, I believe, of the town, and it served portions thereof by public water. Yeah, the law is pretty wonky. Hershey would like to say something. You're on mute.
Thanks. I also want to say that, in terms of just basic development, good practices, there's been in the last, 20 or 30 years, and you probably know this, is smart growth, right? That you want to have more density downtown where there's transportation and services than you want to have in sort of scattered all over the state and especially, or set all over the town. And so that's partly why they have restricted, it seems, the affordability units to downtown and the growth area where there's water and sewer.
So I worked on a smart growth bylaw for downtown in Massachusetts, and we at least did some basic studies on whether the infrastructure could support it. So I'm not seeing any studies that have been done that indicate that the town's infrastructure has the capacity to deal with some of this.
That's gonna be picked up during the planning board review process for what?
Well, and
for
also,
the items that do come before the planning board.
But they're only coming to the planning board under site plan review. You can't deny site
In
plan
certain
review.
circumstances, you're correct. But again, this isn't the town saying this, the state has developed this plan and said, we are adopting and passing LD 2003, you need to adopt it now by December 31st. I'm not gonna sit here and take issue with what you're suggesting, the studies for this, that, and the other thing. It really, for purposes of this conversation, it's a moot conversation. It really is, and there's nothing that we can do. I wouldn't suggest to the town to commission a study to say, study the downtown and how much infill can we get out of this? Because a house down here that happens to have, a sizable back lot, with a garage on it and that property, they can put in another ADU, by right?
well,
Yes,
and also-
I think in the process, I'm sorry, Hershey, go ahead.
no, I just was gonna say the comp plan seems to have taken a look at sort of infrastructure and capacity. I know several people brought it up at the housing meeting about, what is our growth trajectory? How many are allowed? How many will be, what's the projections and what does that look like? And so I think actually some of that stuff has been looked at by SMPDC as they are working on the comp plan.
So is that information available? Because I couldn't find anything.
Well, you can talk to the committee that's working on the comp plan. They've had a bunch of public meetings that people have been invited to, I know. I went to the housing one. There was one after me about economic development, I believe. I think Jen could probably give you more information about how to find, I don't know, we were shown a
So
PowerPoint.
again, so talking about downtown is moot, but I guess the question I have is in the R3, the transitional residential district, the goals of that area are to provide distributed medium density residential development in an area where land and transportation facilities are available, and to direct growth where it can be planned in the most reasonable use of community services. In the area that I live in R3, there are no community services. And we live on a road that has a lot of twists and turns, and so I looked at my property and basically the R3 district is, and this is optional for the town as I understand it. Why is it not optional?
Because the state law was passed that told us you have to do this and this is how we will do it. So the
But
things that are.
There's no community services in certain areas of R3.
That is correct. Define community service.
Well, your bylaw doesn't have a lot of definitions.
Yeah, well,
There's a portion of R3 that qualifies.
yeah.
For example, Academy Street from R3, Academy Street has access to town services. So by default, all of R3 is pulled in. I think I live in R3 as well, and I know we have nothing in it that way. But there's a piece of R3 that folds into the community zone, which has all of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but why doesn't the bylaw then say R3 where community services are provided or
Because it gives,
can be
it gives
provided?
alternatives that if you're not served, you have to. This road has to be pushed into these zones that the town has identified as growth areas that are served in one way, shape, or form to some extent by public water, public sewer. But if you get out into the R3 zone and they have just public water and no sewer, nothing prevents them from developing a community services. As long as that then goes through the proper channels for septic design, and that may trigger planning board review. So there are all those other items, and yes, something like that would be picked up. And what we would do at the planning board level would be to inquire with the, again, if it's meeting the requirements for having to come to the planning board to begin with. Then it would get picked up by, code in the planning staff here. And we send a request off to the water district for whether or not they feel they can serve the request. So, yeah, this is not optional for the town. This is something we were told we had to do. And, you know, after over a year of discussion, this is where we landed. And in my view, it really is the minimum of what we're required to do.
Don't have anything else to say.
Thank you. Sir.
I'll be brief. Very little of the R3 transitional zone is sewage, perhaps almost none. So your statement that it has to be included in its entirety is not in the sense of our 2003, which says quite specifically that in order to be part of this program, that those zones need to have sewer and water, not just some part of them. So I think the analysis that you have to include all of our three is fallacious because parts of R4 have water, but they're not included in this initiative. Why aren't they included as well? Do you have an answer for me?
I do,
Thank you.
because it is not part of the designated growth zone of the town of Southborough.
Nor is Witchcraft Road,
What's that?
nor is Witchcraft Road. No part of Witchcraft Road is in the designated growth area.
But the zone that we.
The zone is citywide, is townwide. It's everywhere.
Listen, you're,
It's, this whole thing is a farce. The whole thing is farce. What you're doing, what they're doing on Zoom, what's being done here at the state level, at the town level, is a farce.
thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any comments on the zoning issue?
Yeah, so, when SMPDC amended this into our ordinance, we took a shot at it and realized that, a little bit of our areas, we put it in, but we could. There were a few areas that we had missed, so SMPDC took a shot at it for us, and I mean, they've been doing it in parallel with towns, they kind of need to look for it, right? My understanding of your question, Mr. Levin, is that let me get my thoughts together here. So when we went and took our ordinance, we took the lawmaking document that you and I had discussed the other day, and we started to embed that into our ordinance. There were a few questions that SMPDC asked. So one of their questions was whether or not when our comp plan that's in the works right now, is finalized, if we're gonna register it at the state. Because there was something in there, and I would have to look at my notes, so I'm sorry. But I can get back to you on the reasoning, but there was something in there that where we registered at the state, that's why the R3 zone is captured in there. If you want, I can look at my notes and I could give you a call tomorrow, and we can talk better about that. But it had to be in there because we were registering our comp plan, but I don't remember the exact details of it up here, and I don't have it. Oh, sorry.
Well, I just also want to be clear, since this is a public forum, and, you know, residents here as well, you know, I just want to state for the record that I reject claims here as a planning board member that we are forcing this on everybody. This is simply the state passing the law And, we have to accept it and incorporate it. This is not something that the town is doing. If the law was not passed, I suspect we wouldn't be here having this conversation. Anyway, are there additional public comments before people get up? I'm gonna go to Zoom to see if anyone who hasn't made a comment would like to make a comment. Anybody on Zoom wishing to make a comment? Okay, seeing no, then I'll open it back up and, please, I'm not looking to, engage in a proverbial debate here. It's an opportunity for you to comment, so, sir,
Sure. Can you hear me?
yes.
Brett Croft, 34 Liberty Street. I like the intent of the bill. The execution from the state is a little bit lacking, but I think that I like the intent as far as permitting more housing. But anyway, I had a question about the definition of subdivision. So the bill says you can have up to 4 units on a vacant lot.
Right.
If someone decided to take an empty lot and put 3 units on that lot, would they have to subdivide the lot? Okay, so would that be considered a subdivision?
My take, because it's new for us, would be, no, it's not a subdivision. Because it's allowed,
Because it's,
allowed by law. It's not a subdivision, because you're putting 4 units on a single lot of record. If they get into a situation where they want to take a parcel and then say, I have a 10-acre parcel, and then subdivide, they have multiple 2.5-acre parcels, that then becomes a subdivision. This is not what they're talking about. If I own 10 acres of land, what they're saying, vacant land, I can go put up 4 units.
okay,
In the name of affordability.
so I guess who would be the owner of that lot? And then who
The
would be,
owner of the lot would be the owner of record, and they
Okay.
would own all of those. You can't, my understanding, could be wrong, but my understanding is this is all about accessory dwelling units. So if I am the primary owner, someone has to own that land. And now I can put up homes, but I can't sell you one of the homes over here because I own the lot. It's gonna be a rental situation. I'm building 4 items. And I may live in one and I'm gonna rent out the other 3 of them. So those can't be sold because that's where it begins to cross into what should be considered a subdivision, which would have to come back to the board.
interesting,
Yeah,
okay,
very interesting.
Do you define subdivision?
It's in the statute, or I'm sorry, in the ordinances. I would refer to that. I don't have it in front of me.
Legal segmentation of land.
Yeah, there's a formal process for going through a subdivision of land. You have to come here, you have to work through the approval process here. And then it's usually by a developer, and those portions are then sold off in a legal sale. And, the interesting thing is, if you go into a subdivision, if I buy a piece of land in a subdivision, what could have been 1 home could be 4. The only thing this is going to help, let's be clear, is depending on how you look at it, I'm not saying I'm for or against affordable housing, but because of the density bonuses that you get, it's really going to help developers. And going from people who want to build and have the means to do that, can build more places to rent out. And, the affordability clause doesn't really come into play, in my view, when you're talking about the ADUs.
okay, no, that helps.
It does not accomplish the intent, the title of the bill, wonderful. But I don't necessarily think at the end of the day it's accomplishing what it thinks it's going to.
Thanks, that helped.
Come on up,
Pat Robinson, Brattle Street. To disagree with you on your comment about being Airbnbs. I think I recall seeing something that someone to rent it out, they have to live there at least 3 months.
Yeah, maybe, perhaps.
So hopefully it's not a lot of Airbnbs, because that, that gets,
Fair enough. I think the issue here is when you call it an Airbnb or a rental or whatever. Perhaps not speaking preemptively, but what we're seeing around the state of Maine right now is as other towns seek to implement this, now they are also being forced to start looking at short-term rental ordinances to limit the ability of, again, the short-term rentals cause a lot of other problems. Not only do they remove a house from the market for people who are actively looking to do this, because, hey, I get it, you want a piece of land, you have property, you want to rent it, it's your right, right? I'm not debating it. But that's the position that the town can find itself.
and the other question I have is, if someone hasn't put 4 houses on a vacant lot, does that go to planning board or just the,
I think that would be just a CEO. Yeah, because it's not triggering the subdivision. Again, that's by right. That's by right. I think that's a lot of, frankly, I think that's a lot of burden to place on a code officer to do something of that magnitude. I think it's not right to put someone in that level of a position, but state law says they will do. Single family homes, multifamily, that's fine, but this is, some of this is pretty excessive.
If I may,
Someone had a hand up, though. On Zoom, did someone have their hand up? I know I saw it. If you want to speak, please go ahead. Just identify yourself.
Hi, Greg. Yeah, hi, Greg. Thanks. This is Joe Delator. I live on Emery Wood Road. And I was actually wanted a follow-up question to what Brett Kropp said. When I read the original law, I thought the interpretation of 4 units on a vacant lot were 4 units in a single structure. Is that wording anywhere, or is that something that could be required? I didn't think it meant 4 houses. I thought it meant 4 dwelling units in a single structure.
So Joe, it was a little hard to hear you. I think your question was regarding the 4 lots, or
Yes, my question was regarding the law for 4 lots. When I read it, I thought it suggested that a 4-unit structure, meaning one building of 4 lots or 4, connected townhouses or something like that, not 4 houses.
You may be correct. Because I think that's getting into the multi-family housing aspect. We have townhouses. I don't know. I can't answer the question, Joe, if it's would be considered 4 units within a single structure, like a traditional townhouse type style, multi-family, or if it would be ADUs. I don't think it would be the ADUs. You're correct. I'll stand corrected on that. I think it's really referencing multi-unit, single facility.
Yes,
Right.
and you could perhaps clarify the language in the ordinance proposed to make that a little clearer. Just a suggestion.
Fair enough, yeah. Yeah, and just so people are aware, whatever the action of the board is tonight, whether we approve it or, send it on, the next step is going to go to the council. And they're going to go through this same process that we're going through right now. Yeah, Pat, go ahead.
quick comment, to say, well, is the word that you, well, not unit.
Yeah, I
So,
think, yeah,
Dwelling might be one
yeah.
house,
Jen, do you have any thoughts on
one
that?
kitchen and one bathroom.
I feel that I was listening to the curtain, so I didn't hear the question.
Yeah, no, the issue is when it refers to units. Is that really referring to the number of ADUs? And Joe may be correct. I think I'm going back to some of the prior presentations. The ADU aspect. Everybody by right, regardless of where you are, has the right to build another structure. That may be connected to, adjacent to, somewhere else on the lot, the whole 9 yards. But when it gets into the 4 units, that really is referring to a single building with 4 units within it, correct? We may need to clarify that in there. Maybe it says it in there. I read it so many times I forget. think they also need to clarify the section about, for any area in which housing is allowed, South Berwick will allow structures with up to 2 dwelling units per lot. If that lot contains an existing dwelling unit, makes it, really, it's only allowing the addition of 1 attached unit and 1 detached unit, which I guess it does clarify a little bit more further down. What page do you live? I'm on, or what section? 40, right below the affordable housing division, the residential areas, which is way up to 4. And, wow, I think that's. I'll say one thing, I mean, we're gonna be learning as we go through this. Are there any additional comments on hold that? Yeah. Are there any additional comments on?
Betsy Ware, 262 Wichita Road. I just want to go on record saying that I am not opposed to affordable housing, and I'm not opposed to accessory dwelling units, but I did an analysis of my property, which is in a medium density residential district, the R3 district. I have 17 acres, and if I subdivided, I'd get about 7 lots, 4 units per lot, so it's 28, almost 30 units. There's 1 unit there now.
You subdivide, you need to do subdivision.
Pardon?
If you subdivide, you would have to get subdivision.
No, I understand that, but I also have probably enough frontage for 6 or 7 lots.
Yeah, there are those other requirements that would have to come into play,
Right.
subdivision frontage.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, as an example,
Yeah.
1 lot, 1 unit, or we've talked about putting in an ADU versus almost 30 units. It just, we bought 5 years ago for the quality of the neighborhood, the rural nature, and now to be told that in one of my discussions today with the regional planning agency, I offered that an analysis, and they said, well, you don't have to do it. But what happens if my neighbor does it? Now I'm in a situation where my property is devalued because of the amount of development going on around me. So, I think that would need to be considered as well. Thank you.
Anybody on Zoom before?
We have one more in the crowd.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Just one.
Yeah, come on.
Rhonda Billadu, Spring Street. So I have a single family home with a separate garage, so I love the idea of being able to do an ADU in there. For retirement, little extra income. So as an ADU, that's still just gonna be part of my address.
Yes,
It won't be any other address. Whoever I have in there as a renter,
it would be part of your parcel.
part of my parcel.
How the mailbox works out, I don't know how you
Okay.
get into
The post office assigns that.
A
notice.
or B, I don't know how
Okay.
that works for mail purposes.
But nothing that has to get recorded with
But
the
you would,
town.
you would own the whole thing.
Okay,
Yeah, and you would rent it out.
okay,
Whoever,
okay,
yourself, and give the house out, it's up to you,
okay,
but you would have that right.
okay. And at what point can I start the process?
After it's adopted by the town council, which this needs to be adopted in town by December 31st, 2023. So, if the board takes action on this tonight and moves it forward, it's gonna go to the town council. And what's gonna happen is it's August now, so it won't get on their agenda until probably late September. And then they're gonna go through their notification requirements, and then they have to go through their public hearing. And so it's gonna be pushing it even on their end. They're gonna have to meet it, but,
Okay,
they'll be going, like I said, they'll be going through the same process.
okay, so after the end of the year, by the new year,
Theoretically,
be able to,
by December 31st, the state has told us it needs to be adopted.
okay. Unless the law changes, all right,
Yeah, you never know.
okay,
Never know.
thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah. go
just to
ahead.
answer your question real quick, so we have lots of ADUs that are around South Berwick right now.
Okay,
And how we address the main dwelling unit is accessory dwelling unit is E. On lots that have EDUs that are further out, we'll say Wishcott Road and Bridge Road, how we address them is we can offer, we can't do it in the cluster, like downtown area, we can run out of numbers, but we don't want to readdress total space, but how we do it out there is we can give the option of choosing a different number. So for example, if you were 6 and you had an EDU, you could do 6 and 8, something like that, as long as there was enough numbers available. Otherwise, if you were 6, we'll do 6A, 6B, and that's how we do it.
Thank you.
Didn't say anything, but I kind of want to.
Sure, yeah, come on in.
I'm Catherine Allen. I live on 136 Yorkwoods Road. I'm pretty sure that's zone 3, but I don't actually know. I think the important thing to note about this law change is that the intent behind it was to give landowners and homeowners more flexibility with their property, to give them back the rights to develop their property. The ADU is a hugely important development that has been previously restricted due to lot size or congestion, whatever that might be. That's going to give Mainers the opportunity to cohabitate, which is a rising trend that we're seeing in the state, as well as allow their kids maybe to stay longer in their homes, but have their own separate living quarters should they choose. Or I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to property values. They've gone up exponentially the past couple of years. This having ADUs and having the ability to have apartments is enabling people to stay in one of the most expensive states. Maine is not getting cheaper. I don't know if you guys have seen your electric bills lately, they're getting higher. So I think my neighbors and I have the same concern. Are we concerned that this is going to enable the community to now create more dense populations, more dense living on our streets? Is that your concern and yours too? We want to maintain that rural feel of Yorkwood. I can see that. I really don't think it will. Having lived here, I'm not sure how long you lived here, but I've lived here a while as well. South Berwick wants her small town feel. It's important to note, like you were saying, this is a law change allowing freedom, but there are still overlays. There are still processes people have to go through. Someone is not going to be putting up an apartment complex on Yorkwood Road. I don't know if you've looked at the ground there. They have to blast. And Witch Trot, you had mentioned being able to subdivide into 7 unique lots, a potential of 4 units per lot. That's 28 properties. If I'm understanding this law properly, wouldn't they need city water and sewer, or would they need to have enough well and septic to
Yes.
support that?
Yeah, they would have to prove that they can meet the community.
Yeah.
That a lot, when you break it off, that could then have up to 4 units, and I'm gonna go back to Joe, and I have another hand raised.
Yeah.
That you can have 2 to 4 residential units.
Yeah.
And then it separately defines multifamily. So I would say, we're talking about a vacant piece of land. Yes, a piece of land, as long as you meet some of the overall density requirements, you could put up 4 units on that, 4 residential units. Or you could do 1 unit with 1 big house with 4 units inside. That's my interpretation of that.
Yeah.
That's pretty clear there. I know I read it somewhere that's right here.
The other big thing we're overlooking, again, is the short-term rental. There are some towns, Conway just went through litigation regarding short-term rentals. Kennebunkport is issuing permits to ensure that their people can still but their people can still occupy. People can still live in Kennebunk as opposed to having it all become short-term rentals. So what's important here is that the state is giving the power back to the municipality to regulate the short-term use and ensure that South Berwick doesn't become a transient town.
Yeah, so that's why we're
That
gonna
is all.
do the short-term rental. Thank you. Someone, SMPDC, who are we speaking?
Hannah.
Oh, Hannah, how you doing?
Hello, everybody. My lighting is terrible in here, but I just wanted to clarify the subdivision discussion. I believe, to my understanding, that the creation on any lot of 3 or more units will still be creating a subdivision even under this law. So even though it is kind of by right now, it still does not circumvent subdivision law in that sense. So it's still treated as if you were creating a regular multifamily 4-unit, whatever, housing structure beforehand, which would trigger subdivision law. In this case, it still does the same thing.
So even though it's not technically a subdivision, it still triggers the site plan.
Yes,
provision?
yeah,
All right, that makes sense.
Yep.
But again, we can't necessarily say no.
Right.
At the end of the day, yeah, it's almost.
it's just reviewed as such.
Certain things may come up, we can say, hey, you gotta do soils. And we wanna see a high intensity soil survey, and that may show that you want 4, well, you can only have 3.
Mhm.
So it can be limited in that regard. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
The other thing, I believe there's a question at one point about whether or not the 3 or 4 units can be within, or if they can be all separate structures, or if they have to be within one structure. The law is essentially saying that the 3 and 4 units can be within one structure altogether, or kind of a mixture of different structures. So you could build one, what would be quadplex, a 4-unit building, or you could build 4 separate structures on the same lot in that sense.
Yeah, I'm rereading it here under the plan.
Or some
unit.
combination thereof.
Yeah. Are there any further public comments?
Just a quick question. Can you, if you build 3 or 4, or however many units on a lot, can you sell them as condos?
Well, it says in the law somewhere that it must be owner occupied. One of the units must be owner occupied. So I would, if you have another thought on that.
I think, so I think there's been a little bit of loose language around the use of the term for the accessory dwelling unit, which under this law is the separate, under 30% of the size of the regular house, and that you can build that without any additional parking requirements or any of the other additional requirements. So you can, now anyone can build an accessory dwelling unit in their house, which is going to be a smaller 30% or less of your regular house. But that cannot be rented out. Now, the new one also allows for multiple units to be built, dwelling units, not accessory dwelling units to be built, where you can build either one attached, one detached, or both onto an existing lot. Now, those ones, I believe, you can rent.
You can rent out even.
Yeah, you can rent all of them.
You can rent them all out.
Yeah. For those, or the 4 units, if you have a vacant lot, those are under separate occupancy requirements than the accessory dwelling unit requirement. And it does have a few more overlays as far as, we discussed about the.
Yeah, I think the board did have a discussion in a prior meeting, what prevents someone from selling it off. I don't think we ever really have an answer to that. I don't have an answer. Does anybody here have an answer? Hershey or Hannah, any thoughts on that? Brett's question was really, if you buy.
I don't-
You put in 4 homes on it, what prevents you from condominiumizing the property?
I think you can. I mean, I think the whole point is to create more housing. It doesn't say it has to be rental housing. So the point is we need more housing, and the state has imposed this in order to create more housing. So, where you can put 1 house, you can put 4. If you don't have the land that's required to put 4, it would have to be a subdivision. And then and just like any subdivision, you could be able to rent it or sell it. I think is it Aaron who's just talking about, I think owner occupancy requirements really are only around ADUs as far as I understand. So that's a completely separate issue.
Only the ADUs, not with these other ones.
So good point, Aaron. I was getting confused between the 2.
Yeah.
Good point.
And I mean, if you think about you're building 4 houses, you have to have some legal mechanism to, be able to have separate ownership, which is what a subdivision does when you can't make it a separate parcel. So this is why that requirement would be in place, right? Yeah.
Units that are created as standard dwelling units can be sold, but I don't believe the ADU can be sold off separately from the home.
Which I think should lead us to a discussion about looking into short-term rental. But on the other hand, I'm not sure we're gonna have a huge building boom right now in South Berwick over this because, it's expensive to build right now. So we'd have to, I don't know.
And my understanding too is that even if you were to build 4 units on your vacant lot, you can build them to the new regulation, but you would still have to go through the condominium process to
Yep.
subdivide any of those out and do all those approvals and make sure it met all those requirements.
Correct.
Where before we wouldn't consider items like that.
Yeah,
we now have to consider. those.
Yeah, you never want to build, yeah.
Right now, it's a value use, because it changes the density requirements where, each lot needs to be, 20,000 square feet. A building needs to be, and I'm using various portions of the ordinance here. But in general, it says, hey, you gotta have a building, and it has to be on a 20,000 square foot lot minimum. It changes the density, and it now says you can have one building, for, what's the density requirement, Jenna?
I'm sorry, what?
We're in the density requirement, it reduces the density requirements.
Yep.
That says now you can basically accomplish more housing units on a single lot. Is really what that is.
I guess the language wasn't clear as far as if you sell off 4 units, if you can subdivide that lot. Because if you have like
I don't have an answer for that, but again, as we just heard, the intent of the law is to increase those housing opportunities, so they could be sold. Is it a backdoor way to subdividing? I don't know. That's a good question.
Well, I don't think subdivision needs a backdoor. I mean, you can subdivide, so
Well, right,
what
but I'm
makes
saying-
it backdoorish?
No, Hershey, what I'm saying is you typically, you look at a subdivision, it's like, like we're dealing with now 35 units.
Right,
This one, I'm looking at a single piece of land
right.
and I can put 4 units on. And, although that would still have to have major site plan.
Well, and one
What-
question is, would our cluster ordinance, right, where we have discretion to say, yes, you can
Yeah.
make it a cluster, would that apply or not? And I assume it would,
Yeah.
but
it
I
would.
don't know.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Well,
You
and the
wouldn't-
point is to get more housing built. So,
Yeah.
So you would or wouldn't?
You would.
Yeah, and again, I think we're mincing words with the subdivision. If you condoize, it's still one lot. It's 4 owners that own each individual
Right.
square within the 4 walls of the house. On one lot, if they're common area, so it's not a subdivision.
Right, so let's just, if you want to comment, if I can have you come up, so we're not criticized on, not including all comments.
Do you want me to go into that?
What's that?
Do you want me to holler in there?
Yeah, please do, yeah, if you don't mind, just reiterating what you said for the record.
Okay, it's Catherine again. I just want to clarify that even if you were to condoize a lot with 1 to 4 units on it, it is still not a subdivision. Because a subdivision is a legal separation of the lots of the land. A condo is shared ownership in the building and the land. And then individual ownership of within those 4 walls for each unit. So it's not a subdivision, to be specific.
But we still have to go through the site where we would pick up on some of the stuff. Yeah, it's confusing, no doubt. So yeah, to answer the question, they could be sold.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it. As you sit here and think about it, yeah, you start to think about these things, back or away, yeah, well, no, it's not. It's a different way of looking at it. Any further conversation on this? On Zoom? All right, we'll close the public hearing. I can't see the time.
It is 8 o'clock exactly.
Okay, 8 o'clock, we'll call the public hearing to an end, and let's see here. With that being said, we'll open the regular meeting, and I'll ask for those in attendance to rise for the pledge of allegiance.
I'm gonna put up my own flag.
So the first item of business here, is there anybody wishing to make public comment on any item on the agenda or any other comments? Anybody in Zoom wishing to make a comment to the board? Seeing none, we'll move on. First item of business is the approval of minutes. We need to look closely at the minutes, because I don't know who was here and who wasn't here. We have a lot of minutes to review. First, the minutes of May 3rd. The people at that meeting, let's see here, what it is. So,
So here, we just have those guys on copy.
yeah, folks in the audience, if we could have you just take your conversation outside, I appreciate it, thank you. Okay, so myself, it looks like Hershey was here, Zach, So let's see, I only have 2 people here tonight that can vote on those. So we'll have to table the May 3rd minutes. We just can't vote on it.
What happens if we, okay,
No, go ahead, Rishi.
nothing, go ahead, just move on, good.
Just a reminder that when we do vote, we'll have to do a roll call vote, as Hershey's on via Zoom, just hopefully I won't forget. The May 17th minutes, I was here, Hershey was here. And Aaron, you were here as well. So I would, go ahead, Hershey.
I move we accept the May 17th to 2023 minutes.
Moved, seconded, any conversation, seeing none, roll call, Hershey.
Aye.
Aaron? Aye. And Greg is aye. So moving on to the June 7th meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
did you call Aaron as a voting member tonight?
that was made a full number of times.
He is an alternate still.
Oh,
I
so
apologize.
for the record, I will recognize Aaron as a voting member. Sorry, thank you for calling that out.
I'm sorry.
No, let's go right ahead. That's fine. I'm glad you caught that. I just, with the comings and goings of the board, I have forgotten who's on, who's alternate and who's full member. So June 7th. You know, I was there. Hershey, you were here. I was here. And Zach. And that's it. We cannot act on those.
Aaron was at the meeting.
Yeah, that's right. June 21st. June 21st, let's see, I was here. Aaron, you were here. And we cannot act on those either.
I wasn't there.
June 19th,
July.
July 19th.
July 19th, thank you, Hershey. July 19th. July 19th. Let's see. I was here, Aaron was here. Zach, Bill. Hershey, you were here via Zoom, so you can vote on this. So motion for July 19th.
Is that the one that needed the black razor changed to black racer?
Oh.
No, it's April.
That was the April.
Oh, okay. I move we accept the minutes for July 19th, 2023.
A second. Okay, probably no discussion, roll call, Hershey.
Aye.
Yes, aye. And Greg is aye, motion passes, and move on. All right, first item under new business, we had a general conversation at our last meeting about requesting the town, sending a request to the town council, seeking some professional assistance, really helping us to redraft the ordinances that pertain to land use here. Maybe the council wants to expand that, that's their prerogative. But would the planning board be in favor of sending off an official request? Again, we had a brief conversation. My suggestion would be, I will draft up a letter saying, and I'll send it out for your review. But can someone make a motion that we request professional assistance in-house with existing folks, or they put it out to an RFP? I have no preference. The council can make that determination. But to bring in professional staff to help us review all of our primarily land use related ordinances.
I make a motion, Greg, that you draft a letter from the planning board to the town council to request assistance in redrafting our land use ordinance.
I second that motion.
Okay, any conversation, seeing none, Hershey
That emotion. Aye.
and Aaron, aye, and Greg is aye, so we'll get that done. Old business, LD 2003. We heard a little bit tonight, and I will acknowledge that there is still some confusion with LD 2003. I do think as we talk about it, I don't, just want to be clear, I don't think to know everything about this. Every time I look at it and read it, you kind of get more and more. Thank you for everybody that participated in the meeting tonight, planning board members, appreciate it. In looking at this, I think we did work out a lot of. We did, I
Hey,
reckon-
Greg, could I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Me? Got me?
It's you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So the affordability requirement sets an income standard, right? A targeted income, but it
Yes.
doesn't actually require that you have the rent be related or commensurate with the income requirement. So for example, it says you have to rent it to somebody at 80% AMI, right? But it doesn't say that your rent has to somehow reflect that. Did I miss it?
Right, so they're saying your income is this, but what's your rent gonna be? That's
Right,
wonderful.
so there's no, so affordable housing sets the rent and the rent is regulated. And it's based on if this is your income, you should be paying a third of your income toward your rent. Right, so when HUD Sense rents for 60% AMI or 50% AMI units or 30% even AMI units or, other types of programs they have, the rent is regulated and they tell you what the rent has to be. So this seems to be missing this major component where it says you have to rent to somebody who is, 80% AMI, but it doesn't say you have to rent it at a certain amount.
So that's rent control.
It's not rent control. It's affordable housing.
Well.
Rent control would be market housing, that you were regulating market rate housing. This is allowing people to basically target a certain group of people who are allowed to rent it. You have to qualify for it. And then your rent is linked to that qualification. That's affordable housing.
Hannah's hand is raised to talk about it.
Oh, Hannah, go ahead.
So the definition under the definition of affordable housing in the ordinance changes, it says that for rental housing, a development in which a household whose income does not exceed 80% AMI, as defined by blah, 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 can afford a majority of the units that developer designates as affordable without spending more than 30% of the household's monthly income on housing costs.
Oh, so it does say that.
And then
Okay,
it
was
says
that in
essentially
our-
the same thing for ownership.
And
Yeah,
that's
I
in-
thought you
that's in-
wanted
the amendment to
Yes.
our ordinance as well,
Yes.
not just
Yeah,
LCAP.
that's
Sorry, I
right here.
missed
I
it
thought-
then. I didn't see it. Great,
C on
fabulous.
the charge. Sorry,
Okay,
Hershey, I said, I thought you were talking about setting a ceiling, like a dollar figure for us to put in here.
it does, well, it does, but it's not,
It's right here, but I thought you were getting into
Yeah.
like, oh, no, you can only charge $1,200 or whatever.
you can
That's
only
it.
charge 400. There is a limit to what you can charge.
Right.
It's gonna be
right.
30% of 80% of AMI's income. They just didn't say what the number is, but there is an income, there is a limit to the rent then. Right,
Right.
Hannah? Right? Yeah.
Yes, there is a
Yes.
limit, and there, I would say probably it's not called out because it changes. So then you would have to amend the ordinance if you add what it was in there, but it references the HUD statute that sets that, so that's what it would go by.
Okay,
So I looked at it. I didn't have any problems or questions with it. I mean, I did spend some time over the past week looking at it. The only concern that I had out of this, and we talked about it prior, was you're telling everybody you can have ADUs, but you don't have to meet any of the parking requirements. I'm thinking of more of the congested areas in town. And I don't think we're gonna solve that tonight, and I'm not suggesting that we insert language for it. Other than in the back of our minds, as we start to work on the other ordinances, if the council goes along with our request. I'm thinking of some more of the congested areas, should we start going down the road of people putting up a lot of additional ADUs in town. That they don't have to meet parking requirements, I'm just thinking of those cars being pushed out into the public way. And I'm thinking of winter maintenance, I'm thinking of sidewalk maintenance, I'm thinking of general traffic flow and pedestrian safety. That's my only take on that, my walk away. But I don't think we're going to be resolving that issue tonight. Go ahead.
We're gonna wait to see if Hannah says something first. Annie, you're gonna talk about the parking because it is in there.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can say about the parking is that the state law mandates that you can't require parking for the ADUs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess there's something accessory to that the town could do as far as a parking study and everything. But we can't change the lack of a parking requirement for the ADUs.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I don't think we're gonna solve that tonight,
Yeah.
other than just pointing out that it could potentially be an issue down the road.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
because you're basically telling people to go park in the public way, 'cause that's where it's gonna happen.
Well, you could regulate it. Greg, couldn't we regulate it by saying you can't park on the public way overnight? We already have
Yeah,
that,
I
don't we?
think that's I don't know if the town has like a parking and traffic ordinance, some towns do, some towns don't. That go through, you know, stop signs where you can park, where you can't park. that
Yep.
kind of stuff. That really would be raising the issue, and that's a town council conversation.
I'm pretty sure that's in the ordinance that goes through the places where you can. I'm pretty sure it says can't park anywhere overnight, and then it has the certain streets where you can park during the day for whatever
Right.
period of time and all that.
And that's why I don't think we're gonna solve that tonight. I think that's something we should be aware of. And at some point, we may want to have that conversation when we go under review of all the. ordinance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, I'm good. Is there any conversation on this? The next step would be, we can continue to talk about it. Or we can accept the changes as being presented and send it to the town council.
I do have one comment to make.
Sure, go ahead.
So in the 140 table A, the land use table, accessory dwelling units are allowed everywhere, but they are allowed places that housing is not allowed.
How can
And
it be an accessory dwelling unit? if There's no dwelling unit to be accessory
Exactly.
to.
exactly, so there's a yes in every single box for that row, but housing isn't allowed in every zone, so I think that should be adjusted so that it's only allowed in the places where housing is allowed.
Housing's allowed.
Yeah, will you make that adjustment if we make that the motion? I mean, it's
Is that at me or Jen?
pretty quick and clear.
DJ will, yeah.
Hey, I'm looking at the LD 2003 overview that SMPDC, and I think it was Paul, but actually presented to us. And what power municipalities do have. And one was to regulate short-term rentals. And I really hope we can have a discussion about that before it gets to town council, unless you think town council should be the one having that discussion.
I will put that in the letter, Hershey. I do think that's something that we need
Okay.
to bring up, get some of their direction on that.
Okay,
We can talk about it, but if it's something they don't want anything to do with, then let's not waste our time, you know what I mean? Happy to have that conversation. I
Yeah.
brought it up, and I think we will need to.
it
look at
also says we can define the maximum area of accessory dwelling units. Is that still true, Hannah?
Yes.
Is that something we want to do?
I don't know if that's a question to me or to the board. It's something that some towns are doing and some towns aren't, so.
I was
Um,
curious about because I thought when we discussed this, and the law limited it to 30%, but when I looked through these ordinances, I just saw that it said only minimum of 190 feet or square feet. Didn't see
How many-
that.
How many square feet, Aaron? Sorry.
It was 190.
190 square feet was the minimum size allowed for the accessory dwelling unit.
The minimum, but is there a maximum? So you could basically, what makes it, what makes it not another house?
Yeah, well, that's why I thought that when we were looking at LD 2004, that it had a limit of 30% of the size of the primary structure. But I did not see that incorporated into our, and I could have missed it, please, but,
No, I saw that and you are right. I'm trying to think about where it is.
yeah, I'm trying to pull up LDs.
I am looking at 140-47, 140-46.1. The gross square footage was removed. The accessory apartment shall not exceed 30% of the total living area of the building. It can be located within the existing building, attached to the existing building, or standalone, but at all dimensions. Zone, which is anything can be met, but I read that 190 such.
So
Yeah,
you could
that-
have, so if I understand correctly, you could have a 3,000 square foot house and add a 1,000 square foot accessory dwelling unit.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I read, Hershey.
But that's like basically another house. So what,
It's a very large, it's a size of a.
I lived in a
Two-car
flat
garage
that was
with
1,200 square feet and 3 bedrooms and, you know, pretty close to, yeah.
But you're already building that onto a mansion that's 3,000, 3,000 square foot is a pretty big house. If you're adding another 1,000 square feet, you've got a large.
Well, and you
structure.
know, and yet people are building mansions. So I know we all think when we think accessory dwelling unit, we think of a little cute shed out back or something over a garage or, do you know what I mean? And I'm just, you know, I think if it's not well defined, people can take advantage of it and basically build what would be another home.
Yeah, I think it's it's a large 2-car garage. If you take the cars out, you got a top floor and bottom floor. It's a.
I don't see anything in the official law that references that 30%. I only see the size that reference the minimum of 190. But the 30% is something that you could add in the local ordinance.
I think that was, we carried that from our existing ordinance, that limitation. Yeah.
Oh, for accessory, for other, right, because we already have accessory dwelling units, right? Okay.
Minimum, he carried a maximum.
Okay,
So is that still in there?
Yep, right here, I'm looking at it.
Okay.
There's-
I'm pretty sure the version that I have printed out is old, so
Well, I'm looking right here at the track changes version,
perfect.
and I'm looking at 140.46.1. I don't have a page to reference, but it's the area with all the red.
Okay.
And all the red, being crossed out in additions. It gives me the impression that the accessory apartment shall not exceed 30% of the total living area of the building. That to me appears to be carryover from the prior existing language. So it sets that maximum, it carries that maximum.
If I might.
Yeah, go ahead.
The reason why that 30 remained there is because, when we started talking about LD 2003 in this town with townspeople who were having those presentations. I presented to the board just a few meetings ago with this, LD 2003. The townspeople were very, upfront about wanting to keep that max 30%.
Yeah.
That's why we left it in there.
Yeah. I can't point to it, but I read in the reading though, just to be clear, I do recall that 190 minimum, 190 square feet. You can't point to it right now, I remember reading.
I just saw it here.
Yeah, I know, that's like one of the.
Literally saw it 5 minutes ago.
The 190 is definitely in there.
Yeah, no, it is. So is there a wish of the board? You want to send this off to the council? If so, someone want to make a motion? It'll be more cracks at the apple than this one with the council.
I know we're on a bit of a deadline with town council, but I'd really like one more week to look at a cleaner copy. Because I'm not seeing some of the stuff you guys are talking about in the copy I'm looking at. It's the one from today's agenda, so.
I also don't see the 30% in the copy on the agenda.
I don't either. That's what I.
Okay.
mean. Yes. We are in agreement there,
It was handed out to us on multiple occasions.
but at this,
And
okay.
both copies were the same thing.
Well, and it hasn't changed, so that's weird, because
I
ever
know.
since Lee J has done his art, we haven't even updated anything on it, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
So I got the original right here.
I'm looking at the planning board packet from 8/2/2023. I'm looking at the red line version under affordable housing provisions and long-term affordability. Right? And I don't see anything that restricts the rent.
That's weird.
Am I crazy? Do you want a screen share?
So are you looking all at the digital stuff per sheet? Are you looking at digital or did you actually download and print it out?
I downloaded it and I'm looking at the downloaded version.
I can answer that part. The language about restricting the rent about the 30% of
Yep.
the
Income.
whatever, that's in the definition of affordable housing, not in the section about
Ah.
affordability.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for
Yes,
clarifying.
that one I
That's-
definitely know, because I read that
That's
to you
fine,
earlier.
as long as it's there. I know, you read it to me.
The
I'm
part
confident.
about the 30% maximum ADU size, I still cannot find though.
I'm looking at that under accessory apartments in my version.
Is it the definition of accessory apartments or is it somewhere else?
No, I don't think so.
Hmm.
So I don't see under the definition of accessory apartments.
No, it's not under the definition.
Okay.
You gotta look for this document. This is what they get wrote. So there's, you gotta remember, there's a bunch of different areas that are being affected. It's not just one particular. You don't have it. That might be why. 140, 47. All right, I'm not gonna sit here tonight. I think what the board is gonna wanna do, can we just see a clean copy? I have what we're talking about. I have the 30%. This was again, what was handed out at the prior meeting. And it's affordable housing bonus density for additional units. And then it continues to talk about accessory apartments, and it talks all about the maximum of 30%. So let's just all get on the same page and we'll move it forward at the next meeting. I don't have any changes, so. We're not all on the same page with the right version, and I think we're all talking the same thing, but I think we owe it to ourselves just to put our eyes on the same piece of paper. So I'm good with that. Let's just put it off to the next meeting. Whenever we meet next, and we'll move it forward at that point. We'll be fine in terms of overall timing. We've already held a public hearing. I think we know the direction. Let's just look at the final version where we need to go. Everybody okay with that?
Yep, Greg, that sounds like a great plan moving forward.
So what I'll do is I'll just kind of coordinate with town staff and we'll go ahead and get this out. And we'll go from there. All right. I gotta find my agenda.
I have something under member comments, so when you get.
Oh, sure. Okay, okay, let's see. Public hearing, we did that. Member comments. Hershey,
All good.
I'm good. Aaron? Good. Jenny?
Okay. So a couple meetings ago, we talked about the home occupation workshop. Can we reschedule that for possibly, if we're gonna put this on to the next meeting, probably not the next meeting, and maybe we do it for September 20th, have a workshop at 6:30?
So can we do maybe this? Do we have any idea how the next agenda is shaping up at this point?
As of right now, because we have a project that's stable, there's nothing on the next agenda besides the clean copy and to vote. There's no new business.
Oh,
Unless
sorry.
Anna got something
Yeah,
else.
go ahead. Lisa, go ahead.
unless Jen, you've heard otherwise, I thought we had the presentation of the market analysis on that agenda.
I have not heard, yes.
So listen, so if all we have is to review the LD 2003 updates. If we all do our homework before the meeting, I think we're all gonna be looking for the 30%, 190, the affordability clause and the definitions. I see those as the points of conversation tonight. So that discussion should take all of 10 minutes, unless we're coming to some vastly different conclusions by that time. I think if we wanna then have that presentation, I think we can probably find 20 minutes to at least start the conversation on the housing, on the workshop, what it. The home occupation.
Yeah.
Because I think there are some issues with that needs some conversation. We're certainly not gonna accomplish it, but I think you can absolutely start the conversation. My preference would be to try to get as much of this stuff, keep it going. Because there's nothing worse than involving all this type of conversation while we're going over big and massive developments.
I agree. So just to be clear, we're gonna do LD 2003, get that buttoned up hopefully.
Yeah,
And then we're gonna hear, I'm gonna confirm whether or not they're coming for the board on the 16th, but if they are, we'll hear that, and then we'll start the workshop afterwards and start talking. about
yeah,
it.
we'll just start talking about it, get out the information, we'll talk about it, and just go from there, at least it starts the process.
That's great, we'll make the agenda accordingly.
Okay, any other member comments? Motion to adjourn. So moved, all right,
Second,
second. All right, Hershey,
aye,
Aaron, aye. Thank you very much, have a good night. everyone.
thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaron, I don't know how you're missing that document, so we'll look into that tomorrow.
Can I just make one comment? No, it's too late. Sorry. I was gonna say for
It
the,
is, I don't want to hear from you now.
no, the 30% is